What gives you hope?
What gives me hope is the next generation, the young people of Israel today. At my age, it makes me feel good that I was involved in this beautiful thing that I saw of young people helping young people.
And my feeling is that the next generation is wonderful, and I think they can teach the older generation a couple of things about decency, about caring, about sharing, about wanting to be together, about not having politics manipulate us, but to have some kind of healthier conversation about what we want this country to be. Hi, Gigi.
Hi, Jeremy.
I'm very happy to be here with you. We never met.
No.
You're from Kibbutz Holit.
Yes.
I'm from Jerusalem. You're an educator. I'm a teacher. And we're both from Brooklyn.
Yes, we are.
which is quite amazing.
Right.
So I think the war has brought us together in a way. We both have stories. We both have what to say about this war. But maybe we'll start a little bit with your life and where you were born, what kind of home you grew up in.
Okay. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, in Sheepshead Bay, in a Jewish neighborhood. I went to a public high school. Normal life. I don't have a religious upbringing. We celebrated Passover and Rosh Hashanah, and that was about it. And when I was in my early 20s, I needed a break from school and from work, so I just took a vacation to Israel. I went to the office of the kibbutz movement, and they said, "Oh, you're Jewish, you can do an ulpan on a kibbutz." And I did. I was supposed to stay for 3 months. I stayed for a year. I fell in love, and after that, it was just how to get back.
Wait, what did you love about the kibbutz?
I loved being in a community where people helped each other. New York is, wow, what a city, but it can be cold and it can be lonely. And I just got to kibbutz, and wow, I fell in love. And it was a kibbutz in the middle of the country, but I didn't stay there. I went back to New York. I had to prepare my mother and father and the rest of my family how I knew that I wanted to make Aliyah and move to Israel. I didn't know exactly how to tell them. So I had a preparation of a year. I joined a group of singles from the ages of 25 to 30. And the objective was either to go start a new kibbutz or to go to a small kibbutz and help. Because we were after studies and we had professions already, and I wasn't a teacher at the time, a lot of the kibbutzim in Israel wanted us to come, and we chose Kibbutz Holit, which is in the northern Negev. Now they call it the Gaza Envelope. At the time, it was one of the quietest and safest places there was in the country, and people accepted us with open arms, and Kibbutz Holit has been my home till 10 months ago, on October the 7th.
And Gigi, what happened to you on October the 7th?
On 6:20 in the morning, on October the 7th, my kibbutz was infiltrated from all sides, from 4 different directions, by Hamas terrorists. Many people were killed, many houses were burned. The neighborhood that I live in, most of the murder took place. aside from me and another few of my neighbors, my neighborhood was destroyed, and 9 of the 15 people that were murdered on Holit were my very close friends and neighbors. From that day, we were evacuated.
Just before that, can you just tell me about one of your close friends?
I have, okay, I'll choose the woman. Her name is Lily Caseman, and she lived across the street from me. She has a beautiful daughter who's 22 now, and we were in contact with each other every day. We saw each other in the morning. I was out watering my garden, and she was smoking a cigarette next to the house. And I can't believe that she's not there. And I have, next to her was also a very good friend of mine and her husband that were murdered. And it just, the list can go on. And I can't say one of the people are more dear to me than others, because these were my very, very close friends. I don't have family in the country. So these people, my community, were like my family. And it's still hard for me to fathom that they're not here.
Mm-hmm. And you were saved?
For some miracle, for some strange miracle, and I still don't understand till this day why they skipped us. My husband and I and my son, who also lives on the other side of the kibbutz, came very close to not making it. His house was burnt down. By some miracle, my daughter lives up north, and by some miracle, the 4 of us are alive, which is more than I can say for most of the people in my life. Mm-hmm. So we suffer a little bit from survivor's guilt, right. But we're trying to be okay day by day.
And you were evacuated on October 7th?
Yes.
Okay. So what happened to you after the evacuation?
We were, my kibbutz was taken to a neighboring kibbutz where we stayed the night, and from the 8th of October, we were taken to the Dead Sea area, to Kibbutz Engedi in the hotel, and that's where we lived for many months, myself, because my husband stayed on the kibbutz. He was in the security committee, and he's also a dairy farmer. So he went back to the kibbutz and he worked and he stayed there along with the army and some volunteers. And I was on Kibbutz Engedi, and he used to come visit me on the weekends. Recently, we moved to temporary housing on Kibbutz Revivim, which is closer to Holit. So my husband can come back every day and be with me, and we're trying to make a home now.
So what does a kibbutz look like right after the evacuation, with so many friends lost, people who are used to the kibbutz and the freedom and the grounds? Or
I was back to pack up what I could from my house. I can't walk out I go in through the back door. I can't walk out through the front door because there are burnt houses and boarded up houses, and it's too hard for me. So I just go and I do what I have to do. And
But what was it like during the evacuation, the beginning of the evacuation? You have a kibbutz who went through this terrible trauma. What was it like? What were the first days like? What were the first weeks like in the Engedi where you were put up?
What we did was we sat together from the morning. The first 3 weeks, month, we were surrounded by social workers and psychologists and anybody, and so many donations of things, donations of anything you can think of, from clothes to toiletries, because people didn't know what to do. So they just wanted to give. So they wanted to give them with material items, or they wanted to give with just sitting and talking to us, and they wanted it with food, anything they can think of to try to, the basic the basic things that you need for your life was just poured on us. Shampoo, anything you can think of. And but we sat together because as much as all the psychologists wanted to help us and all the social workers wanted to help us, we knew what we went through, and only in the very beginning I felt that we could help each other by talking about it until it got like into where we couldn't talk about anything else. So after that, it was good that we had professionals to help us get through the time. It was we couldn't. It was a shock, and we couldn't believe what happened to us.
And then what happened? Maybe we should talk about the school and your work in the school.
Okay, well, maybe first you can tell me why you're sitting here with me
Oh gosh, why am I
and
sitting
what you
here?
went through this past year since the 7th of October.
We live in Jerusalem, and I was the principal of a big high school in Jerusalem, the Himmelfarb High School. So I'm very much involved in young men being in the army. Almost all of our students serve, and many of them in combat units. As a high school principal, and even before that, as a teacher, I lost many students, about more than 25 students who were killed since I arrived in school, 3 when I was just a teacher for my class, Roy Shukrun and Yedidia Geffen and Eliraz Peretz, and then many when I was principal, and now I went back to teaching 4 years ago, and I had 2 son-in-laws who were called up on the 7th of October, and my son, who was also called up. I think I realized that it was bad at the beginning. I realized that this is not a small incursion, but this is a dramatic occurrence. And my 2 daughters moved in with us. And there was sort of this lull at the beginning of the war. What happened is we have the southern border, but we have the northern border also. And my son was with the Givati Brigade in the south, and we were really very much worried about him because he just got out of his army service and he was well trained. And then I had 2 son-in-laws. And then and people don't realize there was a lot of shooting from the beginning in the north also. What happened was the Hezbollah joined the Hamas. And in fact, large swaths of the northern part of Israel have become sort of a war zone. And I was out, it was the beginning of November, and I was just walking up, and my son, who was at home, called and said, "Abba, where are you?" And he said, "Come up immediately." My son never gives me orders. He's the most delicate young man, most respectful, and I realized something happened. And I came in and I saw my daughter Noah on the floor, sitting down with her hand.
So sorry.
With her hand over her head, and they were the 3 officers who come to announce. And my son told me Yinon was killed. He was killed up north. And Yinon was just he was just an amazing young man. He was a teacher. He taught history. He started his PhD in actually he was working on history of Zionism in Tel Aviv University. And he was also very learned in Jewish subjects. He used to teach children Torah in the Talmud Torah in the little yeshiva in Tkoa. And he was really very well versed both in Jewish and in general subjects. He was a real intellectual. He was a real Renaissance man, and he was a great listener. He listened to children. He listened to me. He would listen and think and maybe add a comment. At a certain stage, I said, "Why don't you just become a clinical psychologist? You're such a wonderful listener." They really had a beautiful life together. They just had a little baby who was 6 months old. And Yinon was gone. But I want to tell you something about my daughter Noah. Many years ago, my father told me, I must have been in high school, he said, Freud says that people need two things to live well. They need work and they need love. And I sort of internalized that. And after the 30 days of mourning, my daughter, she was living with us since the beginning of the war, and she said, Abba, my daughter's a teacher, she teaches 10th grade, and she said, Abba, you know what? I'm going to go back to my class. I'm just wasting my time. I'm not doing anything. And I sort of looked at her, you have the strength to go back to be a teacher of 30 girls in 10th grade? And she said, yes, Abba, I want to go back. And she went back to her classroom, maybe 30 or 40 days after Yinon was killed. And she told the girls, you just be regular, I'll be regular. You don't have to give me emotional support. I get it in other places. She knew she needed emotional support. And she went back to her class.
Good for her.
And her students love her. And Yinon, actually, he loved chocolate. So they made this huge memorial full of all kinds of different chocolates, Mars and Kit Kats. There was a whole, and they just called it Memorial for Yinon, and it was just full of chocolates, which was lovely.
Special.
It was special. And in a way, the preparing the classes, helping the girls with their problems, was something amazing for my daughter. Now, I know so many widows and so many parents who have lost their children in the war. Not everybody has the strength.
Right.
And it's not always a question of choice. Some people just need more time. And for some people, it's harder. But Noah was able to do it. And then she said something very interesting to me, which at first glance is surprising. And she said to me, Abba, maybe it's easier for me because we had such a good marriage. And then she said, but Abba was much too short. They were only married for 3 years.
Wow.
And there was something so beautiful about their relationship, which she's going to take for the rest of her life.
She sure will.
And I was thinking about what my father told me, that people need work. They need to do something which they like. I think that was part of the ethics of the kibbutz. You have to work.
Of course.
And every form of work is respectful. And you need love. People cannot sustain themselves without loving and being loved. And Yinon left this beautiful child. And she loves him. And he loves her back.
Of course.
So, and as a teacher, and I have different parts to my life. I have my family, which of course is the center of my life, and I have students who are a very important part of my life. I have 6 graduates of my school who were killed in this war, and I have 2 graduates who are severely wounded, and I have another 15 who were wounded. And I think a lot about, you were talking about community, what brought you to the kibbutz. New York can be very lonely. You know, people think New York's great, it's glamorous.
It is great. It is great and it is glamorous, but it can be cold at times.
It can be cold, it can be lonely. And at least for me, I feel there's a deep sense of community here, in the smaller sense and the larger sense. Why don't we go back to you a little bit, Gigi? Okay. So tell me what happened. How were you able to create a school out of nothing?
I didn't create. I just I joined the Ministry of Education. I'll go back, and my high school was very big. 13 kibbutzim and 14 moshavim, and one high school in the area, Moatza Azarit Eshkol. So to show you proportions, I teach English, junior high school and high school. We were 17 English teachers in the school, and I find myself in the Dead Sea and getting word that they're building a branch of Nofey-Habsor of the school in the Dead Sea for all of the people that were evacuated from their homes. So that's Kibbutz Holit, Kibbutz Beit, Kibbutz Kisufim, Kibbutz Magen, and these are kibbutzim that lost students that were murdered, and teenagers that lost their friends and lost parents and lost grandparents. And I said, and if I'm willing to join and come to teach English and to be part of this. And in the beginning, it was about a month and a half after this all happened, and I was just sitting in the hotel room, and like I said, we were just going over it again and again and again. And then I said, I'll try. And I remember the first meeting before the school opened and the students arrived. We were a group of teachers sitting in a circle, and we all had to introduce ourselves. And there was a lovely girl that sat next to me, and she said, "Hi, my name is, and I'm from Kibbutz Kisufim, and I only moved there 3 months ago, and now I'm here in one of the hotels in the Dead Sea, and I'm going to join. I'm a history teacher." And she looked familiar, but I didn't know where to place her. And at the end of the meeting, she said, "You know, I'm Adi's sister. Adi's from my kibbutz," and she was one of the women that were murdered on the kibbutz. Such a beautiful girl, with a 4-month-old baby and a 4-year-old boy, and she was murdered, and her body was booby trapped and hidden inside of her house. And I looked at her, and then I saw the resemblance between the sisters, and I just started to cry. And she said, "I'm so happy to see you." And I said, "I'm so happy to see you." And I told her how much I loved her sister. And another young man who was sitting across said, "Hi, my name is, and I'm from Beit. Both of my parents were murdered." He's about 34, 35 years old. Both my parents were murdered. And I figured that my way was studying education, my way to deal with this situation. I'm taking responsible for this. I'm being responsible for all of the 7th grade here in this branch in the Dead Sea. And I just looked and I said, "Well, if he can do this, then I can do this too." And it was a lot of preparation, because I found myself there by myself with a volunteer from Haifa, a young kid that just came because he has the heart of gold, that didn't know the students and didn't really understand, and a couple of other volunteers that came for 2 hours a week to volunteer and teach a class here and there. And in a matter of 3 weeks, very quickly, the Motzar of Tamar and the Minister of Education and our Motzar, Zarit Eshkol, the Regional Council of Eshkol, all worked together. And there were classrooms, and there were air conditions, and there were computers, and there were desks and chairs and a teacher's room. And it was just incredible that in this small area they did this. And it wasn't just the high school and junior high school, it was also the elementary school. We were all together. And then I had to prepare myself for the students coming. And I have a few students that were murdered on the 7th of October, and I had to deal with their friends. On a kibbutz, when you have your grade, when the kids are together, they're not just friends, they're like brothers and sisters because they grow up in a closed community. So how do I start teaching English to a group of kids that lost parents and lost their best friends?
So what did you do? What text did you bring?
What I did in the beginning was there were a group of girls, my students, 5 girls that know me for years. What could I do? I sat down, they sat outside. There was no getting them into the classroom because it just wasn't going to happen. They saw me, they gave me a hug. We started to cry, and I just sat down next to them and listened for 3 weeks, at least. I don't even know how long it took. Slowly but surely, I was able to get them into the classroom. It was a process of me speaking less and just listening to stories and listening to how they felt and listening to what they went through. And when we did try to do a passage or read a text or something in English, in the middle of it, they would just stop and something reminded them of someone or something. Just stop and listen. And I just had to go with the flow and be there for them with a lot of love and a lot of cookies and a lot of tea and a lot of love. And that's how I got through this thing. If it was the most challenging months of my life, but I'm so happy I did it because I think I was important for them. And I even saw kids that went through horrors that I can't even begin to describe. And they did their Bagrut exams and they passed them. And wow, it was something really special to see the resilience of these young people that went through such a horrible ordeal that's unimaginable, and how they were able to pull themselves together. I think because they had the warmth and the togetherness that they needed at the particular time. It was something very special.
Were you surprised by their ability to overcome?
I think I was surprised by their ability, and I was more surprised by that they gave me the strength to carry on and to go through with it. And I'm really grateful to that. And I'm really grateful to the principal of the school that called me up and said, "Gigi, come do this with us. You can do it." What do you have to say about the young generation of today?
First of all, I love them. And, people our age, for generations, always talk down the younger generation. It's just something older people do. I never believed it. I always believed that generations change and they're different. But at least with my Himmelfarb students, I always saw the warmth. I always saw a the deep value of serving. When I finished my army service here, and when I finished my yeshiva studies here, I went to New York to do an undergraduate degree at Columbia University, and I became friendly with people at the School of General Studies who served in the military, and I have tremendous appreciation for people who are willing to serve their country. I think about it a lot. Actually, I'm sort of, a couple of hours ago, my wife, Sarit, and I, we just dropped off our youngest son, who was just inducted to the IDF. He's going into a special unit that specializes in tunnel warfare, because we know this ordeal is not over, and you have this mixed feeling because I'm extremely proud of him, and he wants to serve, and I understand that if, regardless of political views, and I think political views in our conversation are irrelevant, this small Jewish nation is surrounded by many people who just don't like our existence in this part of the world.
You're so calm about it, and you're so gentle. Because since the 7th of October, all I walk around saying is, "What did I do that everybody wants me to be annihilated?" I have my words are stronger.
I think there's a lot of envy. I think, with all our faults, and Israel has its faults, and with all of our all of the things that bother us about all kinds of things in this country, it's quite a remarkable country. Yes. That means we're sustaining a democracy under very harsh circumstances. This country has been able to absorb millions of immigrants in a very short time. This country has Nobel Prize winners. And I think even you started our talk with a sense of community. I think with all the differences between the different kinds of Israelis, there is a sense of community. I mean, people try, definitely on the day-to-day level, many people care.
So if I can just, since you're saying that, I have to tell you about my husband. My husband was born a Lutheran Baptist in Oklahoma.
Wow.
And came here when he was 18, and in the army converted to Judaism, and was a paratrooper in the Lebanon War. Went back didn't know what he wanted to do with himself, so he went back to the United States, and he joined the American Army, and he served in Alaska in a reconnaissance unit for 4 years. Then decided Israel is where he wanted to be, so he came back here.
Wow.
And I met him when he came back, when he was in his late 20s, all full of himself because he went through lots of wars in 2 armies, and he's been since the 7th of October walking around with an M16 attached to him. Because he's still in the security committee on the kibbutz, and he said he will walk with this. He calls it's his second wife. He will be with his M16 until this war is over. Mm-hmm. And so,
does he have any regrets about
absolutely
moving here?
Not one, and neither do I.
Yeah. So I remember I served in the first Lebanon War. And I remember I had this conversation with my mother. Because, we came from New York. Life was fine in New York. My parents were great people. And it sort of came out. I was in basic training and the war broke out. And sort of my mother said, we moved here and something can happen to you. And I was young then. I must have been 19. And I said, Mommy, now it's my decision. And I always remind her her grandfather, my great-grandfather, who was the leader of a small community in Slovakia of Bardejov. And he stood up to the Germans, but he was gassed in Auschwitz. And I don't like to use the Holocaust as raison d'etre for the state of Israel. I think this is our country, this is our home. It can all be because of the Holocaust. We have to have a vibrant, good, democratic, value-instilled society here. But, thinking aloud about my son, and I say he has the privilege of serving in a Jewish army. And, people were talking about the 7th of October as a Holocaust. It was a pogrom. It wasn't a Holocaust, because the difference is that the Jewish people can stand up. It's not as if we're not that weak people that we were. We can take our destiny in our hands, and we can argue forever about what that destiny is and what kind of Jewish and democratic country we want to have here. And I think all those discussions are legitimate and important, but there's a sense of being here, and there's a sense of meaning. I reread Man in Search of Meaning of Viktor Frankl. I read it many years ago before I went on the Poland trips. And, living a long life is very important, and having children and grandchildren and grandchildren is very important. But life also has to have some kind of meaning. And, when I think about us, you and me, I think living here and being in contact with young people and trying to form the next generation, I think it gives us a lot of meaning.
And a lot of hope for the future.
And a lot of hope for the future.
We will always be Jews, and we will always be, there'll always be anti-Semitism, and there'll always be people that don't want us around. But I've learned just how resilient we can be in times of unimaginable horror. That's the way I describe it. I think there's only to look forward. And I think at some time I'll be able to look back less, and my family, my community, and the whole area that I live in, that will be able to rebuild, and look forward to the new, and try to put what we went through in a different kind of perspective, and try to rehabilitate our area and also ourselves.
I think we also need time, because we're sort of still in the middle of this trauma. We don't know how it's going to end.
No.
But this is definitely the biggest drama, I think, that the state of Israel has had since 1948.
And in my lifetime, I didn't think I would. I didn't think I'd go through it. Wow.
Well, we're in a tough neighborhood. You know, the
Yeah.
Middle East is not.
Yeah, no, I know. I have friends in the States that have unfriended me on social media because of my choice of where I chose to live my life. It's my fault. So that's another thing I have to live with.
You know, and it's interesting because I never try to convince anyone to move here. I think it's a personal decision. And the only thing I can say is that people, wherever they live, people should strive to have a life which has some kind of meaning more than just living. People need not only to live, but to live for something. And usually it has to do with work and love. That's the way I understand it. And I feel I get a lot of it here. And it's interesting because you talked about listening to your students. You know, I've seen many, many bereaved parents and many wounded soldiers. And basically, they just want to talk and they just want to know that somebody's really listening.
To them.
Which, when I go back to my son-in-law, he was just a great listener. Gigi, so we're sort of at the end of our conversation. What gives you hope?
What gives me hope was that I got to see young people, volunteers from all over, coming to help students that went through this horrible catastrophe and trauma and gave their all. What gives me hope is the next generation, the young people of Israel today. At my age, it makes me feel good that I was involved in this beautiful thing that I saw of young people helping young people. It was very special.
And my feeling is that the next generation is wonderful, and I think they can teach the older generation a couple of things about decency, about caring, about sharing, about wanting to be together, about not having politics manipulate us, but to have some kind of healthier conversation about what we want this country to be. And in that sense, I'm very optimistic about this country. I must say it was very moving to meet you. You know, sometimes you find somebody's heart open to you, and I found my heart opening to you because I felt that you were really listening.
I feel the same way, and I feel very privileged that I got to sit and talk with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you.